Thank you, everyone, every participant, and particularly the MISTI and UNSCAP to give us the opportunity to discuss with the STI stakeholders here in Cambodia and to work on the STI roadmap. You can see on that on the slide on the screen I would say the large diversity of the stakeholders and organizations that we have met during our work. We have done quite many interviews to understand a little bit more about the dynamic of the science and innovation ecosystem here in Cambodia. And that consultation, those interviews, those interactions help us to work on to define the STI, an STI assessment first, and then to work and to work with MISTI on an STI roadmap. But before going to the STI assessment, which is the second part of that workshop today, I would like first to start with some methodological aspect and to explain to you the way that we have worked, the concept that we have used, the purpose of an innovation policy, and the conceptual framework that we have used to describe the situation of science and innovation in Cambodia. And finally, I will remind the process that we have had to design the STI roadmap. Regarding first the basic concept, I think it is particularly important to set the grounds and to set the grounds of a common understanding about what is research and innovation. Usually in the literature, and I think that you can move on the next slide, please. So what's research and innovation? I think that first we have to distinguish between what is research and development and what is innovation. Research and development is, of course, the generation of new knowledge, is the generation of new idea. But having a new idea, having a research result coming out from research labs is not necessarily an innovation. To become innovation, an idea needs to reach to a certain extent the market. So innovation goes beyond research and development. It goes far beyond the confines of research labs to users, to suppliers and consumers everywhere. In government, business, non-profit organization, across borders, across sectors, and across institutions. And we are taking that definition of research and development from one hand and innovation on the second hand in the next in the STI assessment and in the STI roadmap, of course. In addition to that, there are different types of innovation, and basically there are four main types of innovation, as defined by the OECD manual. The first is about product innovation, so it's just about inventing a new line of product. For instance, the new iPhone 20 years ago. There is process innovation, so the way the way that you are producing raw material, for instance, can be it can be a new process, a new way of processing, of producing products or services. That's process innovation. Third, there are marketing innovations. So it's about a new marketing method involving significant changes in product design, for instance, or in packaging, for instance. And finally, there are organizational innovation, which is more related to the organization that you put in place within a business or within a public administration, for instance, for delivering services or for producing raw material. So in a nutshell, having an idea is not at all an innovation. You need to reach again the market to really push on the market an innovation. An innovation is not necessarily new to the world. It can be new for the company at the scale of the company. So for a company A, introducing a new machinery that allow the company to produce in a more efficient way is an innovation at the scale of the company, even if the competition is already using that process, but it's new for the company, so that's an innovation. An innovation is not necessarily science-based or technological based, as organizational innovation or marketing innovation are not technology-based innovation. Innovation can be incremental or radical. Of course, when the iPhone has been introduced on the market for the first time 20 years ago, it was to a certain extent a radical innovation. Now it's not the iPhone number 12 or 12.0 is not really a radical innovation. It's more about incremental innovation. So incrementally, Apple is improving the products over the years. You can have high-tech innovation and low-tech innovation. And finally, innovation is mainly driven by researchers, by entrepreneurs, by people, individuals that wants to innovate, to create, and to develop their idea and to introduce their idea on the market. So that's the definition of innovation, and we have used that definition again for the purpose of developing the STI roadmap. But innovation needs to be supported, needs to be enabled, and here policy play a great role in helping entrepreneurs, researchers, not only to conduct research, but really to innovate and to bring forward their ideas on the market. A science, technology, and innovation policy and strategy, what we call STI policy, it's a cross-government policy to harness research and development and innovation as a major driver of productivity that can strengthen economic growth and development. So first, STI policy is about supporting productivity, is about supporting economic growth and development. But it's also about addressing societal challenges, or what we call now sustainable development goals, such as climate change, health, food security, and poverty. And so an STI policy has dual purposes. One is about productivity, economic growth. The second one is about supporting countries in addressing societal challenges, societal interests that shape the society. And the key focus of what we are talking today is really about designing a roadmap for implementing the STI policy in Cambodia. But developing an STI policy is a rather complex task, because in essence, STI policies are complex policies due to their cross-government nature and due also to the complexity of the research and innovation process. From a policymaker's side, when you have to think about setting an STI policy, you need to think in a systematic way. You have to take an holistic approach, because supporting research and innovation, making happen innovation, requires to think in terms of national innovation systems, because to make happen innovation, you have to play, as policymakers, you have to play on different leverage. And that's the national innovation system. You have to build a truly national innovation system if you want to succeed in developing STI policies. A national innovation system which facilitates research and innovation is composed, as you can see on that slide, of different building blocks that each play a role to provide an environment that enable research and innovation. At the core of the national innovation system, as you can see on the screen, that's the gray box, there are three important building blocks. The first one is about the political system, the second one is about education and research system, the third one is about the industrial system. Political system is about setting the strategy, the agenda, the direction, because to set an STI policy, you need directions. You need to define key targets, key goals, what you want to achieve. You need to define in which economic and technological domain sectors you want to focus efforts in terms of R&D investment from the public government side. And you need also to set up a governance mechanism that help the different line ministries within a government to align, to coordinate, to move and to push innovation in the same directions. You need to avoid any fragmentation because, again, STI is a cross-government nature policy. It's about education, it's about digital policy, it is about industrial policy, it is about economy, finance, and so on and so on and so on. So that's the first building block. The second one is about education and research system. If you want to develop science and innovation policy, you have to think in terms of providing to the STI community the right people with the right skill in capacity to do research, in capacity to innovate, in capacity to create new ideas, to implement those ideas, and so on and so on. So you need to train the people to do research or to use the innovations. So it's about training researchers, building research capacity, and it's also about training the existing workforce to use the technologies, to use the new ideas, the new thing, the new processes, the new marketing tools, and so on and so on. So that's the second building block, which is truly important. The third one is, of course, as important as the second one, as the first and the second one. It's about the industrial system, which is, of course, the core piece, because innovation comes mainly from the firms, from the industry, from the large companies, from the SMEs, from the startups that invest, that turn research results into innovation activities, because firms are the ones who are introducing on the market the ideas and generate activities, generate added value, generate economy of scale, generate productivity savings, and so on and so on. And you need, as policymakers, to make sure to create an environment that allows the industrial system to innovate, to operate. So that's the third building block. And then there is the interplay between the industrial and the education and research block, which plays a critical role. This is in the middle of the screen. Everything related to the creation of intermediary institutions, research institutions, broker organizations such as clusters, technological parks, technology transfer offices, and so on and so on. That building block, the first one, is also important because innovation comes out from networks, exchange of ideas, bringing together knowledge organizations, so knowledge producers and knowledge users, such as the firms and the industries. This is also key because you need also to bridge the information gap between the knowledge producer and the knowledge user. Actually, if you look at the top performing countries in the world on science and innovation, for instance, I have in mind Finland or Sweden or Singapore, for instance, in Asia, the capacity of the STI system to propose to the knowledge producer and to the private sectors knowledge intermediaries, knowledge brokers, such as science park, clusters, etc. It's a key element of the performance of national innovation system. So that's the fourth building block. Then you have what we call the demand for innovation, which is on the top, which is also a drive of the national innovation system, because of course the companies, the research and education system are addressing the demand from consumers, from producers, and the demand is also creating a demand for innovation and push the industries or the research system orient their research capacity, orient their innovation activities towards certain goals. So it is really important also to think about the connection between the demand and the industrial system and the education and the research system. And finally, the two last building blocks of the national innovation system are, from one side, the framework conditions, which are on the top on the top right of the slide, and the infrastructures, which is on the bottom of the slide. Framework conditions in infrastructures are really also important pieces of the national innovation system. It's all the regulatory environment that help the industrial system, the private sector, and the education and research system to perform well. It's about setting IPR, intellectual property right regime in the country, for instance. It's about setting standards and norms and having standardization bodies, for instance, because we know that putting standards is a way of pushing the private sector to align on international standards, and it's a powerful means of innovation. It's about setting regulatory regime, law regulations to support innovation that enable environments such as tax break, for instance, for research and development activities, and so on and so on. So a national innovation system that performs well needs to use those different leverage to support the system. And finally, if you look at the top performing, there are, I would say, 7 main functions to analyze strengths and weaknesses of national innovation system. The first one is about entrepreneurial activities. The second one is about knowledge development. The third one is about knowledge diffusion through networks, including policy networks. Then the guidance of the search. I already talked about directionality. The fifth is about market formation, which comes with resources mobilization. And finally, a last key functions or a last key success factors is about creation of legitimacy, counteracting resistance to change, because innovation is about change. And sometimes it happens that change is not so easy to accept for different organizations. So it is important to create legitimacy, to create ownership of the system. And I think that part of the objective of that workshop today and the workshop in next Thursday, this Thursday, is also to create some ownership, some buy-in from the different science and innovation stakeholders here in Cambodia about the around the STI policy. So that's the way we have started. I mean, by the way, I mean here that the national innovation system is really the approach that we have used in conducting our work to draft the STI assessment report and then to work on the STI roadmap. And the idea is really to follow the different functions and the different building blocks that I have explained regarding the national innovation system. And Francis, in few moments, will talk about the national innovation system and the assessment that we have made here in Cambodia. But before that, I just want to conclude my first presentation by just remind, and here it's part of the methodology that we have worked, of course. We have started working on the STI assessment in Cambodia, keeping in mind that the government, through the Prime Minister, has already approved the STI policy in December 2019, which set already some strategy and strategic orientation. I suppose that you already have a look at that document, the National STI Policy. Its vision is that STI is a driving force for sustainable socioeconomic development, and that Cambodia should focus on adopting and adapting technologies and further innovation. The STI policy, as approved in December 2019, is really wanting to lead to the realization of the Vision 2050 for Cambodia, and is really aiming at helping Cambodia to become an upper middle income country by 2030 and a high income country by 2050. That's the overarching goals of the STI policy and strategy that has been already approved again. Maybe also to keep in mind, the national STI policy, as approved in December 2019, also define 5 scientific and technological domains that should be the focus of the investment efforts of the government. So 5 scientific and technological domains, which are agricultural, yield increase, produce diversification and agro-processing, modern production and engineering, health and biomedical, material science and engineering, and finally, services and digital economy, including artificial intelligence. Afterwards, after the STI policy and strategy, there is a need, because the STI policy and strategy is setting a broad target, broad priorities that needs to be further detailed, further detail, further define. And here comes the STI roadmap, which is of which the characteristics are to define the desired outcomes consistently with the vision. So to go more deeper into the operationalization of the main pillars of the STI policy. The roadmap is also helping to articulate strategic thinking behind both the goal and the plan for getting there. So it's setting the plan for getting there, listing some key actions to implement on the short term or on the longer term. So it provides also a time horizon and some key milestones. And the roadmap is also setting some targets, interim targets and final targets. And finally, the roadmap is also serving as a communication tool. So that's the next step after the STI policy, really to go into further details, further operationalization, listing and setting key actions, key targets, and providing a time horizon to implement the STI policy. And so last but not least, to propose that roadmap, Francie and myself, with UNESCAP, with Misty, we have worked through three stages. First, months ago, we have defined the scope and the ambition of the roadmap, of course, and we have engaged with some key stakeholders within Misty and with some key ministries. And then in step 2, we have made a baseline analysis, and particularly in that stage, we have collected data. We have made a literature analysis about STI policies in Cambodia, and more important, we have conducted around 50 stakeholders interviews to define, identify, discuss with stakeholders the challenges, the strengths, the weaknesses that they appraise within the system. That baseline analysis and those interviews led us to provide an assessment report in the form of a SWOT, and Francie will present the SWOT in a few moments, and led us to draft a first draft of the STI roadmap that we want again to discuss with you, and we will start today to discuss with you about the roadmap and the priorities and the actions that we have included in the roadmap, and we continue the discussion next Thursday afternoon to go deeper into the STI roadmap and trying with you to prioritize what should be the key actions, the key targets for the government in the next few years. And after that, we will after the workshops, we will finalize the STI roadmap with Misty, and I think that the more strategic part of the job will start for Misty and for you, which means implementing some of the key actions and making sure that you are on the right direction. Thank you for listening, and please feel free to raise any questions to us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mathieu. And perhaps what we can do now is we can take a few minutes to take questions. If you have a question, you can either write it into the chat. So you can click the chat button at the bottom of the screen and write your question into the chat, or you can raise your hand. So if you click participants on the bottom, and then you'll see that there is a button to raise your hand. You can do either of those things if you would like to ask a question about what's just been presented.
Yes, excuse me. Yes, I'm from the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fishery. Yes, I would like to have just two questions related to the concept of your presentation. And when I look and listen the presentation, you go through more just innovation, you see. But I would like to make clear, because the keyword here is science, technology, and innovation. Science, technology, and innovation. So that is I would like, what is a key element contribute to the science, technology, and innovation? That is the first question, in order to catch up what is the roadmap, or my understanding or master plan related to the science, technology, innovation in Cambodia. That is one. And yes, of course, we understand you present the innovation system, the first in industry sector. But other for the other step, they are transformed to the other sector system. For example, like to transform innovation system to agriculture system, from industry to an agriculture system. That is I would like to make clear in order to catch up, because according to your presentation, is more focused on innovation system. That is my question related to this, because according to our master plan for research, for agriculture research, yeah, of course we more related to this in terms of how to call in terms of organization, in terms of research, research, education, yeah, research and education, as well as the governance, yeah, in order to support to science, technology, innovation for agriculture system. Thank you. That is my general question, and or just to catch up to get more concept, yeah, related to this draft of roadmap. Thank you.
I think it should be clear that we are covering both science and innovation when we are talking about the National Innovation System, and when we are talking about the STI roadmap. We are talking about science, because I think that here in Cambodia, particularly, there is an obvious need of building or strengthening the research capacity, the science foundation, to generate more knowledge, be it in the agricultural sector or in other sectors, particularly in material sciences or in digital technologies. But it's also about technology absorption and how to support SMEs, particularly local SMEs, to use new technologies to produce, to process, to organize, to get to be more efficient in the way they are producing, so to generate productivity gains, I would say. And it's about innovation, because and particularly for the companies, it's about also developing new technology. So it's not only about using technologies coming from abroad, but it's also about developing their own innovation capabilities, adjusting their process, adjusting the marketing to the marketing process, adjusting their organization. So it's really, we are talking really about science, technology, and innovation in that document, and that's why you need to have a fully holistic approach. You cannot miss one piece of the system. You just need to prioritize over the years, because you can't do all things at the same time, in terms of prioritization, budget, and particularly budgetary prioritization. But over the time, you will have to work on the different building blocks of the ecosystem, including in the agriculture and the agro-processing sectors, of course. And if you look at Cambodia, here in the agricultural sector, one of the big challenge at stake actually, and for which STI policy can help, is really to turn the agricultural economy in Cambodia from producing raw material, crops, seeds, etc., to an agro-processing industries where you are capable to create more added value, where you are capable to export agro-processing products abroad, or at least within the country. So it's really about how to create more added value. I hope I addressed your question.
Thank you so much. So we have another question from Pitch Malika, who says, I would like to learn more about how to get the right person to equip the capacity as you elaborate on slide 8.
That's a very broad question, quite challenging, quite difficult, and I think it's part of the STI roadmap. And maybe we could park that question for now, because I think that we will come back on that questions both in the STI assessment part of the workshop, but also on the STI roadmap, because clearly building the human resources to innovate, to conduct research is one of the key priority of the roadmap, as we have put it in the paper that has been circulated. And I think that we already included some actions in the document that we want to discuss with the participants to enrich the solution, to enrich the list of actions and and the solution that we can think of.
Thank you. So thank you both. I think now's a good time for us to move into the SWOT analysis. And so Francie is going to be sharing with us a little bit of the results from the SWOT analysis that they've created.
Thank you very much. So following up the presentation of the National Innovation System blocks, I'm presenting this SWOT analysis, which is built alongside the same line of the National Innovation System presentation. So we studied the political system, the education and research system, the industrial system, but also the overall infrastructure for innovation and the framework conditions. So we also, I'd like to say a few words about this SWOT analysis. It was built through several sources of information. As mentioned before, we worked on a literature and policy review, an extensive one, reviewing, of course, the rectangular strategy stage 4, the sectoral policies and strategies, but also some sound data issued from the Global Innovation Index, the World Economic Forum reports, the WIPO reports, so the World Intellectual Property Organization reports, the Elsevier Scopus, which is providing data on the research citations and publications. We've worked also on the UNESCO science reports. And of course, the analysis has been fed with information provided by you during these 50 interviews that we've conducted in the last 2 months. And we built that collectively, Technopolis, of course, but of course also MISTI and ESCAP. So what we will be showing now is really the fruit of teamwork and co-construction work. Another word about the SWOT analysis is about what is a SWOT. So SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we chose to present it in two parts. First, we present the strengths and weaknesses of the National Innovation System. On a sort of mirror, we are presenting the weaknesses and the threats. We worked on this overview that can also accompany you for the breakout sessions, I believe. That is really a snapshot of the SWOT and allows you to get the main and most important matters that we've identified. So first of all, we have to recognize the very, very positive steps of the Cambodian government and society as a whole towards science, technology, innovation, especially in the last 2 years. So the government infrastructure has been quite improved and enhanced. It's interministerial and overarching with the MISTI, the creation of MISTI, the National Council for STI, and also the Asian COSTI, which is a coordination body for STI. And it's been aligned also to other bodies through the other ASEAN countries. So the policy design has been quite advanced, and we've been also seeing that the education system and the research systems have entered a sort of transition phase with ambitious and necessary reforms that have been drafted, policies that have been drafted, the introduction of STEM in the curricula that is already planned, and an upward trend in the research that has been done in the last 20 years. I mean, in the last 5 years, it has been a number of publications, a number of, I mean, the involvement from the researchers has been quite exponential comparing like in what it was 20 years ago. We see also that the tech startup ecosystem is really on an upward trend with more than 300 tech startups that are already active in the country, and really an attractiveness from like Cambodia is getting very attractive for entrepreneurs and tech specialists from the region. And we've seen also an emerging innovation infrastructure system and favorable framework conditions for incubation, but also for finance. We will go into details in the next slides, but it's just to set an overall picture once again. However, there has been a number of challenges, a number of initiatives still to be strengthened, to be further detailed and implemented and financed. So the governance overall of STI is really fragmented because it's been shared across 11 ministries, I believe, and there's a need really of appropriation of and co-construction and co-implementation of the STI goals. There's overall, and it's been recognized very across all the different ministry, all the different stakeholders we've been interviewed in the private sector, academia, and research, that there's a lack of scientific and entrepreneurial and professional skills in teaching all across the country that has to be addressed to create a pipeline of scientists and researchers and engineers for the future. There's a lack of research culture overall. So even though it's been on an upward trend, it's still really far from what it could be, what the government, what you can engage to have in the in 10 years from now. And the industrial ecosystem has been favoring a happy few for the moment, happy 300 tech startups. And really to reach the SDGs, there's a need to further spreads the possibilities for entrepreneurs and SMEs to take up innovation. And last but not least, concerning the infrastructure and framework conditions, which are quite in a very favorable, that are very favorable to innovation. There are still some punctual weaknesses, notably the lack of finance overall, the lack of norms and certification, and intellectual property is not yet enforced. So I propose that we move to more details for each of the blocks, the subsystems of the National Innovation System, so that I can present more in details what we've identified, and this can be the material, will be the material you will be discussing in the breakout sessions to complete them or to amend them if you believe that it's necessary. So as I was mentioning, there's favorable government and governance for STI development today in Cambodia. Initiatives are already started with the restructuring of the Ministry of Industry, which became the Ministry of Industry, Science, Technology and Innovation. The existing interministerial body in the National STI Committee, which is very important body on which a lot of the actions of the STI roadmap can rely on actually, and this ASEAN COSTI. So many policies, many new policies and initiatives have been enacted, and in which the role of innovation has been fully recognized. So you're starting with very strong policy base, which is really to be again recognized and taken up. So I mentioned already the rectangular strategy and the National Strategic Development Plan. In the Vision 2050, there's also acknowledgement of the need to achieve the SDGs and through innovation. And to note also the Industrial Development Policy 2015-2025, that is also recognizing the role of innovation. That is also a foundation on which to build for strengthening the I would say the industrial system and the STEM in the country. And it's been supporting also by the country partnership with UNIDO to quote this important partner. Then concerning the, I would say, sectoral policies and initiatives, we noted a number of them from the Ministry of Economy and Finance, from the Ministry of Post Telecommunications, and from the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports, from the Ministry of Labour, Vocational Training, and from the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forests. These are also documents acknowledging innovation and setting some directions, which the Ministry of Innovation recognizes and will build upon and will co-monitor or co-support for implementation. As already mentioned earlier by Mathieu, priority technologies have already been assessed and embedded in the STI policy 2020-2030. So it's not an exercise that we will have you do now, selecting these technologies. It's been already done as also a co-construction work. But there are many difficulties to overcome. So this, there's a lack of culture of coordination that is not just specific to the STI policy. It's not specific to Cambodia. It's very important that for the STI policy implementation, so, and not just implementation, already policy design and strategy design and roadmap design, that the MISTI is not working in silos. So that's why actually we are all gathered today, is to not be in silo and continue in the future with this process work. Also, today, Cambodia is ranking 101 out of 127 on the Global Innovation Index, and is the last among the ASEAN countries. So there's this has been assessed as a weakness, but at the same time it can become a strength, because you can set very ambitious goals to get up on the ladder, I would say. And we've seen that. We've seen countries like Vietnam coming up on the ladder and becoming a middle income country, setting up very ambitious goals for innovation. So that's a weakness that can become an opportunity also. Concerning the education system, so it's in transition, as I mentioned. The basic education is in progress, and the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport, as well as the Ministry of Labour, Vocational Training, have already engaged into tackling the flaws of the basic education and introducing STEM in the curricula. On the higher education side, higher education institutions have started focusing on entrepreneurship and innovation. And there's a number of initiatives such as incubation and startup centers, which have been recently set at the Royal University of Phnom Penh, NUM, the Institute of Technology of Cambodia, and also the National Institute of the Ministry of Post and Telecommunication on ICT. There's also some important initiatives and programs that have been already, if not started, at least approved and financed by the World Bank on the higher education innovation project. These are very important elements to take into account to, again, in the assessment, being sure that these are strengthened, these are considered as a foundation, as a base to then continue building and improving the education system. We, however, noticed a lack of scientific, entrepreneurial and professional skills in research and teaching, sorry. So overall, the science, digital and entrepreneurship culture remains overall weak, even though we've seen a lot of progress, like that entrepreneurship becomes now, can become a career plan from early age, which was not the case before, but still is very limited to a few number of kids and young people. It's been imbalanced in terms of gender, because women are still overall very constrained to take STEM as a career. And there's also overall in the society a sort of propensity for risk adversity, which again is not specific to Cambodia. It's been seen in other countries, but it needs actions to change the mindset of the society as a whole and of the youth. And we see also little investments of SMEs overall to invest in enhancing their staff capacities. Not that they are not aware that there's a need for enhancing the staff capacities, but rather that because of the lack of propensity for risk, and because of somehow the lack of trust in the future policies, etc., there's sort of no action being taken on enhancing the capacities of the staff, which again I think it's recognized by all is a very important point. It has to change. The education system does not provide enough graduates with the required skill. There's a mismatch between the graduates, graduates, and with the markets, the private sector needs, and especially in terms of tech, in terms of STEM, in terms of technicians, and in terms of engineers. A small percentage of the students taking STEM and agri do it, like, because they are trustful of that they will find some jobs on the market, but overall there's a need to enhance the trust that these are really careers to be undertaken, and that the quality of the training is there, and that the market will be appreciating it and will recruit this young professional. It's been recognized also that there's a lack of dialogue between the education and training providers, with industry leaders and employers, and also with the tech startup ecosystem, even though it's been improving. And notably, I've been mentioning the university-based incubation and startup centers, which are sort of what we call the triple helix, like really involving the government, involving the academia, and involving the private sector. But these are still punctual, and it has to be sort of rolled out more widely to really create the pipe of professionals that Cambodia needs. And finally, concerning the technical and vocational education training, the sector has been already engaging into a large reform, but it's still facing pressing challenges to increase technology capacities in the SMEs, and it has really to draw a path for that, which is not yet there. I've seen a question. I don't know if I can, I take it now, maybe later. STEM, oh yeah, there's a, yeah. The STEM means science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Concerning the research system, it's been in transition. I mentioned the positive aspects in the introduction. It has improved in the last 20 years. There's 5,000 publications in the last 20 years with this impressive upward trend. The concentration of the research, there's a concentration of research in the universities and a few public research institutes. There's, but probably not that many public research institutes, and clearly not research development institutes. On the top 10 research area, we can see medicine as the first one, agricultural, biological science, so very medical but also earth and planetary science, nursing, and multidisciplinary. There's a lack of research culture and a lack of attractiveness of the research functions overall, which explains the low performance, I would say, of the research system in Cambodia. There's globally little R&D, so research and development of companies, little research done at universities, and little full-time employees dedicated to research. There's only one research organization, which is the Royal University of Phnom Penh, among the top 10 research institutions providing content related to Cambodia, and only 2 Cambodian researchers are on the top 10 counts of publications and citations. So it's still, the research is still very, I would say, foreign-led, foreign researcher-led. And overall, there's no specific scheme to incentivize researchers. And so there's little time spent from professors and teachers on research. Concerning the industrial system and the demand for innovation. So we've mentioned the contemporary tech startup ecosystem, which is on an upward trend with rising opportunities to channel the swift development of the country toward STI, notably because the country has been quite industrializing. The tech startup have progressed. Cambodia is attractive for the regional companies, and entrepreneurship is becoming a career option. The industrial ecosystem is still unbalanced because there's a lack of culture for producing and buying local. And as I mentioned a bit earlier, there's a high proportion of expatriate funders. And finally, concerning innovation and infrastructure and framework conditions, I would say that the main points to be taken away for the discussion in the breakout rooms are that even that there are a lot of co-working spaces and incubators. There's a strategy for promoting inclusive businesses, which have been quite leading, paving the way for innovation in the country. There's a good access to finance. I mean, there's improving access to finance with a number of initiatives. Notably, there's a high level of FDI inflow, and initiatives are the SME Bank, the Entrepreneurship Development Fund, and the Capacity Building and Research Development Fund. There's also some important policies like the startup policy from the Ministry of Post and Telecommunications, the National Skills Development Fund and National Entrepreneurship Fund. And also the Ministry of Economy and Finance has worked on a 3 to 5 year tax break for the SMEs in the 6 priority sectors. There's an IP law and a number of protection, of consumer protection law, e-commerce law, well, commerce laws that are also paving the way. And however, this nascent infrastructure needs to be further strengthened. Notably, the incubation facilities and access to finance for early stage companies are not optimal. And they are not optimal also for the SMEs, for the scales up. And I believe that this is one really important point of attention. The intellectual property rights are not enforced, and the information services are lacking. And finally, the norms and certification are not developed to the level that they should. Thank you very much. It's been quite dense. Again, the purpose was to present in a few words what we've identified, and for you to think of each of these building blocks, each of these strengths and weaknesses, improve what we've written, maybe nuance if necessary, or just consider that this is really the right picture of the situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francie. So that has been a lot of information to take in. You probably have some questions about that, and not to worry, we're going to be doing some Q&A in a little bit, but we thought maybe now is a good time just for us to take a 5-minute break. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then after this break, what we're going to do is we're going to come back and we're going to go into breakout rooms. We're going to go into smaller rooms with about 20, 30 people to have discussions with Francie and Mathieu. You have an opportunity to ask follow-up questions, and then we're going to be working on prioritizing and discussing some of those SWOT items. So let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. To breakout discussions. And in order to introduce us to how those discussions might work, I'm going to share a slide. There will be a facilitator in each of your rooms, and we're going to be discussing the strengths and weaknesses. Now, there will be 3 parts to our discussion. The first part will be to ask what kinds of questions you have about the SWOT analysis. So I saw a few of you had some questions about that. This is your opportunity to ask Francie or Mathieu those questions about the SWOT analysis. And we'll just take 5 or 10 minutes from the discussion to do that. The second part is to discuss whether there are any changes or additions you think ought to be made to the SWOT. And then the third and the final piece is to prioritize them, to look at which items might be most important. So these are going to be the 3 things that you'll be discussing in your breakout room with the facilitator. Now, something that we are going to use, a tool that we are going to use for the discussion is something called Padlet. And so what I'd like you to do is just click the chat box at the bottom, and you'll see that I have pasted a link into the chat box. And if you open up that link, it will be a tool that lists all of the SWOT items that Francie just went through. So if you don't remember all of the items, don't worry. They're all up on there. And I'm going to show you just what that page looks like. So if you click the link, you'll be able to join us on that, and you'll want to join us for this exercise, this upcoming exercise. So this is what the page looks like, and you can see we've got the political system strengths and weaknesses, we've got the education system strengths and weaknesses. And if we scroll to the right here, you continue seeing all of the items. So in here, we will be able to add new items, or if you think we ought to edit some, we can do that as well. So you can go ahead and click the link to be able to view the items, and then we will be able to make changes or additions. And importantly, when it comes to prioritizing, then you will be able to vote on these using that link. So that, once again, the link for that is in the chat. Okay, let's head into our breakouts. If Rafael, you'd like to send us out? Okay, welcome back everyone from the discussions. I would love to hear a little bit of what was discussed in each of the rooms. I know that there were some very active and lively discussions. And so perhaps what we can do is we can start with Mr. Sokeng. Mr. Sokeng, would you like to tell us a little bit about what were some of the key points maybe that were discussed in your breakout room? So King, if you're speaking, we're not able to hear you. In that case, let's head over to Ms. Kalyan. Ms. Kalyan, would you like to tell us a little bit of what was discussed in your breakout?
Sure. So basically, there's a lot of questions from like few questions from our participant, which is from ITC as well as Ministry of Agriculture, including related to the SWORD, and basically they want to just clarify on the strengths as well as like what are the top like what are the information that we can actually add on to the policy, to the STI roadmap. And then we actually have a little bit discussion about the challenges about the funding and also research and development. So basically, let's just clarify on the understanding of these SWOT presentations. And we actually can, we also have opportunity to vote what are the most important priority that we want to focus on. So basically, we can see that a lot of vote in terms of the a lack of culture and coordination between government office, which this is like one of the most vote from the participant. Related to like political system, it's one of the weaknesses. And we also can see the strength that people also focusing on the recently structured ministry of the STI, like MISTI ones. And then, so yeah, and then a lot of, sorry, I need to actually look at my note quickly.
No problem. And then maybe we could, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, that's also the thing that Matthew also clarified about the intention of the research and development. So why we need to do that and why it's important. Yeah.
Okay, this is fantastic. No, thank you so much for sharing. And maybe we can go back to Mr. Sokeng. Mr. Sokeng, are you with us?
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
At the break session at the moment, our participant raised about the SWOT analysis, and as well as about how to promote the research capacity, and also with the he raised some idea about biotechnology, and as well as he also raised about the secondary data, and also how to, you know, how to promote primary data. And also he raised about he raised some comment about you know, like resources, especially he especially focus on the human resource and financial resource.
Mm-hmm.
And one more thing is that the representative from Royal Liberty of Agriculture, he stated about the Cambodia agriculture, to create the Cambodia agriculture society, and especially develop about the science innovation as well. That's all.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, both of you, for sharing. And what I'd like to do is just like to do a quick tour of what has been prioritized in terms of your voting just earlier. And I'm going to go ahead and share. And so we've got, the political system here, a very strong point here around the recently restructured ministry. Of course, the point about the lack of a culture of coordination, that was highly prioritized, 25 votes. The governance of the NNIS being fragmented, also very highly voted. Higher education institutions focusing on entrepreneurship, many upvotes here, but also basic education and MOIs and MLVT having already been engaged. So that's been great. And then we've got, in terms of weaknesses, there was very strong agreement around the education system, higher education system not providing graduates with the required skills, and that science, digital, entrepreneurship, culture remain overall weak. And then as we go into the research side, we see that the concentration of research in public universities and research institutes as a strength, we've got 12 votes there, and the weakness, of course, being a lack of attractiveness. Now, what's interesting here is the RUPP being the only Cambodian research institution in the top 10 research publications. This got many downvotes as a weakness, and I think it might be interesting for us to hear a little bit from you, the people in the room. Is this something that you disagree with? Why has this come up as a highly downvoted item? And then if I go to the right here, weaknesses in terms of the industrial system, the Cambodian industrial base being narrow and uneven, and the number of informal businesses being high, a lot of concentration in cities, and access to finance steadily improving on the innovation infrastructure side as a strength is something that that has been pointed out. Everything else, got essentially 10 votes or less. So I wanted to just show you, what were some of the top prioritized items here, and maybe it might be worth hearing from people about this highly downvoted item. Anyone would like to provide a comment on this?
So thank you, Kirk. Regarding to this downvote, so my question is how you get the figure. I mean this information. How you collect that information?
Okay. Mathieu, Francine, would you like to speak a little bit to that?
Of course, we worked on the Elsevier's corpus, and these are the publications which are in international journals. So that's both for the Royal Institute of Phnom Penh and for the researchers themselves.
Mm-hmm. So what is the keyword or the search term that you use in Scopus?
Well, actually, we looked at Cambodian related content, mm-hmm. and looked at which universities were publishing the most, as well as being on the citation count, and the same for the researchers. We didn't look at specific themes or topics.
Okay, yeah.
But just to precise, then on the medical content, on the medical topic and biology topic, then we've seen that the rank of Cambodia is a bit higher than the global ranking on the research publications overall.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not taking account the, I would say, only local content publications. It's really on an international level that is repertoriated in this corpus. It's just an indicator that is allowing you to have an idea how you rank among ASEAN countries and other countries. So of course there are some local publications on local journals. And we believe that it will be an added value to add these elements, to add this vision, whether it can be provided by the at a ministry level or at the higher education institutions level. We will add it to the SWOT, of course, as suggested during one of the breakout sessions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
And it is, sorry if I may add, Carl, I think that that evidence is consistent with the fact that the number of researchers in Cambodia is quite low if we compare to neighboring countries in the zone. If you look at the UNESCO science report, based on the UNESCO statistics, there are around 30 researchers per million inhabitants in Cambodia against 700 researchers per million inhabitants in Vietnam. So that means that it just reflects of the fact that the research based is a little bit less developed than other countries in the zone. So that means that in terms of number of articles published in international journals, at the end, that reflects the situation. And so certainly one of the challenge, and I think that we have discussed in my breakout room, this issue is really about strengthening the research foundation of the country, and particularly in the domain of applied research. So meaning increasing the number of people doing applied research in the public sectors and in the private sector.
Thank you so much for the reflection and the responses. Anyone else would like to reflect on the conversations or the priorities that we have highlighted in the last discussion? I think we have another question in the chat also, which is about the medical and science health related publications. Are they mostly from Pasteur Institute or NIPH? I'm not sure if Mathieu, Francie, either you would know from your research, but that is a question in the chat.
I think that we need to check the information because I do not.
I remember that it's from Pasteur. That's correct.
Okay.
It's from the unit working notably on malaria.
No, I think I can also share that with you from the literature, from the database Scopus. Pasteur is the most institute who publishes the research in medical and health related article, you know. So I also did a review on the publication or research institute in Cambodia in 2019. That is Pasteur is the most they produce a lot of most publication in international level, and following by the not mention the NIPH, but Ministry of Health. So I think there is the NIPH that is affiliated with the Ministry of Health, and then for UPP and ITC. Yeah. So my question that I raised before, what is the key term or the search term that you use? I think to evaluate the researcher in Cambodia, we need to understand about those indicators. You know, if we use the international indicator like the age index, publication index, or something, maybe it not come with a true figure. You know? So I think we can try to find the way to come up how's the actual productivity of the research in Cambodia. Yeah.
thanks. Any other reflections on the prioritization?
Excuse me, sorry, if I may.
Yes.
Just want to add to what Dr. Kongkia mentioned. If possible, please annex the data, the raw data that you are able to collect at the end of the report, because that brings us a lot of questions. We understand also. Thank you for a lot of policy review, and we'd like to look at the raw data that you are able to collect. So based on that, we could reflect the reflection in the report. Yeah, thank
you. Okay, great. So it looks like that will be done, right? That will be something that we can do, right, Matthew?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions at this point. So what I think might be useful is perhaps let's take a short break. We'll take another short break. And then what's going to happen is we're going to move into a second discussion around the STI roadmap. Oh, sorry, did someone want to say something? No? Okay. What we'll do is we'll take a short break, and then we'll progress into a discussion on the STI roadmap. I know that a number of you had asked questions about that piece, and that will be a part of today's discussion. So let's take 5 minutes to step away from the computer, grab something to drink, whatever it might be, and then we'll come back and we will have a presentation on the STI roadmap and a discussion around that. We'll see you again in 5. What we're going to be doing now is we're going to be hearing from Technopolis on the STI roadmap. And I'd like to invite our colleagues at Technopolis to tell us a little bit about what is some of the material that they have prepared for that.
Thank you, Cal, for passing the floor. So indeed, we are going to make a kind of teaser, because with that session, we want to highlight some of the key issues we would like to discuss more in depth with you on Thursday, because on Thursday we will focus our workshops completely on the STI roadmap, on the priorities, on the actions, and so on and so on. But we wanted to end up with that first workshop to inject in your minds, I would say, some priorities, some actions that we would like to discuss again deeper next Thursday. So I'm going with Francis, and we will share the work, Francis and myself, to go through priorities, key actions, and some high-level targets that we have put in the STI roadmap. If we start with the overall objective of the roadmap, and just as a reminder, as I already told you in the methodological part of that workshop, the STI roadmap builds on the National Science, Technology and Innovation Policy 2020-2030, which has been approved by the Prime Minister in December 2019, and which the main objective is to strengthen the STI foundation and to improve the STI environment and to support an innovation ecosystem for sustainable and inclusive development. And the overall and the overarching objective of the National Science, Technology and Innovation Policy is again to realize the Vision 2050 of the government to become an upper middle income country by 2030 and high income country by 2050. So that vision is really the driving force of the STI roadmap. It's really about how to support, to accompany the path towards transiting from a low middle income countries to middle income countries and then to high income countries by the means of science, technology, and innovation. And in doing so, of course, the STI the draft STI roadmap is really embedded into the rectangular strategy of the government, embedded with, aligned with the National Strategic Development Plan and the Industrial Development Policy 2015-2025. If I move to the main priorities that are listed in the document, the document is right now structured around 5 main priorities, and which are obviously and logically coming out from the STI assessment. The first priority is about improving the governance of the national innovation system. The second one is building the STI human capital, and we have started during the discussion, during the previous breakout room, we started to discuss about this with some of the participants. And those 2 priorities will be presented in very few minutes by Francis. The third priority is about strengthening the research capacities and the quality of the research, which is done particularly in the public sector in Cambodia. The fourth is about increasing collaboration and networking between STI stakeholders. And the last one, which is, I would say, one of the key priority, is enabling the environment for innovation absorption capacities of SMEs and attraction of STI investment in the country. The fifth priorities, again, are based on our assessment of the STI system here in Cambodia, and again are, in our view, quite well aligned with the rectangular strategy and really focus on how to make a greater use of the technologies available within the private sector, how to build the research capacity, and how to build the human resources needed for conducting innovation and research in development. Francis, can you please take a few minutes to present the 2 first priority, and then I will take over after the second one. Thank you. Francis, please.
Thank you, Mathieu. So, unsurprisingly, one of the first pillars of this STI roadmap that we propose is improving the governance of the national innovation system to enhance the coordination. We noted how much it's key to avoid silos, to avoid fragmentation, and to enhance the newly created Ministry of Industry, Science, Technology, Innovation role, and to outreach this role. We acknowledge that there's been some steps undergone through clarifying the role of stakeholders, but it has to be outreach to all of them and really getting, again, clear roles on who's doing what at each steps, and trusting also the National Science, Technology and Innovation Council in its role to approve and discuss the direction of the STI policy. The second, I would say, sub-objective would be to strengthen the awareness and capacities of the government to implement the STI policy. So designing STI policy instruments for such purpose. To generate further awareness about STI, it could be set a campaign of awareness, of promotion of STI throughout the government, the teachers, the professors, the researchers, the business associations, the intermediary support organizations, and developing a plan for training the MISTI employees and other government employees on performing their roles. And a last sub-objective is about monitoring and evaluation of the implementation of the roadmap. Monitoring and evaluation is a very important key function in policymaking. It allows to have evidence and to design evidence-based policies. So making sure that MISTI is partnering with the National Institute of Statistics, for example, and that evaluation and review of the roadmap is incremental, so is happening every 3 or 4 years. Concerning the second objective, which is about building the STI human capital, it comes as a very important pillar of the STI policy. And here we acknowledge that there's a need to shift the country economic focus to industrial-based needs and qualified human resources, from technicians to engineers and scientists. So there are 4 sub-objectives. The first one is to enhance the scientific culture in the society as a whole. So we're talking about the population, we're talking about the parents who will also get their children have a better mindset for uptaking STEM. We're talking about creating museums, forums for the population to have access to this scientific culture. The second sub-objective is about enhancing the technology readiness of the youth at the primary and secondary school. Actually, it came up through one of the breakout sessions that there is a need to inject STI and STEM in the curricula at the primary and secondary school, and it needs also for sure to have the teachers be trained for teaching correctly to the children. The third sub-objective is about to increase the attractiveness of the STEM curricula and the number of STEM graduates in the higher education system. So we've noted that there was already some endeavors and policies drafted by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport to inject the STEM within the curricula. The objective here is that there will be support by the MISTI, and there will be co-work on increasing the attractiveness of the curricula and making more youth take up this career. And the last one is about strengthening the quality of teaching and collaboration with the private sector at the TVET Center, TVET being Technology Vocational Education and Training Centers, to make sure that there is a matching between the needs in the industry, in the market, in the agriculture, in the health sector, together with what the youth are taking up as teaching, as classes and as the content of the classes. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Francie. Can you hear me, Francie? My microphone is.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, sorry. So we come to the third priority, which is about strengthening the research capacities and the quality of the research. Basically, knowledge generation is key on the long term to address societal interests and private sector needs. There can't be innovation without, to a certain extent, without a good science, applied and basic science. But at least applied science is much needed. So innovation shifting towards an industry-based economy needs to more investment into research and development and innovation activities, both in the public and the private sectors. And so that's why that priorities is breakdown into three sub-objectives with a listed of actions. The first sub-objective is about setting a national research agenda, which defines priority and research domain of interest for the country, which can be declined into more sectoral research roadmap. But it's about setting direction first. The second objective is really to provide competitive research and development funding for applied first and then later on basic research, which means getting the commitment to invest a certain amount of public money on research and development carried out at the university within the public research organization. And in the paper, we talk about having a national research fund, for instance, and it's also related to the third sub-objective, which is about creating an environment that provide incentives to conduct research, and it ranges, for instance, from supporting researchers in developing international collaboration, for instance, in the field of research. Of course, it's about salary rise for the researchers, making the research career more attractive. So that's the third priority. The fourth priority is about increasing collaboration and networking between the STI stakeholders. As you know, innovation comes out from exchange of ideas and people across organizations, economic sectors, technological domains. And so that's why having intermediary organization, knowledge broker institution, place-based innovation is really important and play a key role in that regard to build the linkages across the key innovation stakeholders. And for that priorities, we have defined three sub-objectives. The first one is about making universities and research organizations more open to the private sector by rolling out university business linkage offices, for instance. The second sub-objective is about rolling out incubation and acceleration facilities across the provinces and not focus incubation support, acceleration support only in the capital city, but really disseminate innovation facilities that support startups, young SMEs to innovate in the different parts of the countries, which is really important. And the third sub-objective is about piloting technology and innovation parks and cluster to create the innovation network to allow SMEs with large corporations to collaborate together and to collaborate also with universities, research organizations, education centers. So that's really a core objective. Last but not least, the fifth priority is to enable the environment for innovation absorption capacities of SMEs and attraction of STI investment. Indeed, and I think that it has been mentioned in one of the breakout rooms this morning, there is challenge at stake in terms of capacity of SMEs to absorb new technologies coming from abroad. And there is also issue at stake in terms of access to finance to support that technology absorption, or to develop new processes, new technologies, new organization within the SMEs. And so the fifth priority is really to provide the necessary support to the SMEs to innovate. So it's first about providing advisory services to SMEs to innovate. It's about, second sub-objective, to provide access to finance for SMEs to innovate. I remind you that recently the government, at the start of the last year in 2020, has started to operate the SMEs Bank and the Enterprise Development Fund to support access to finance of SMEs. I think that one next step should be first to make sure that those two schemes are really supporting innovation within the SMEs, and secondly, certainly to roll out the scale of the investments that are being made through that funding instrument, which are quite interesting. The third sub-objective is also to attract and incentivize FDI, foreign direct investors, to invest in STI activities in the country, and to incentivize them to collaborate with local SMEs. If you look at the government is reviewing the investment law. And I think this is the good momentum to review the law, to make sure that we are setting the right regulation, the right benefits for the FDI to attract amongst the FDI the ones that are investing in high-tech sectors, for instance, or the ones that are planning to collaborate with local stakeholders, with local SMEs, again, to create the network of actors and to facilitate the knowledge transfer between FDI and the local SMEs. Last but not least, the final sub-objective here is to promote entrepreneurship spirit and to enhance capacities of the entrepreneurs. So that's the fifth priorities. And the last slide, you can move on, Cal, please, and go to the next slide, please. That final, yeah, that one. Yeah, thank you. That final slide is really about to start discussing about what should be the target, because we think that in building a roadmap is really important to set quite ambitious targets that will drive any further steps in the future. That doesn't mean that if we are not capable to achieve those targets, it is a complete failure. It's not the rationale, but it's really targets to drive the direction of the policies that will be made over the next 10 years. And here on that slide, we have just sum up some of the targets that we could set in the STI roadmap, and that's food for thought for you. And maybe we will talk later on Thursday about those targets. But for instance, one of the targets could be to make the NCSTI the lead coordinator on STI policies and to coordinate sectoral STI policies, for instance. One of the targets could be increasing the proportion of STEM graduates in the universities. Actually, they represent 20% of the students. So by 2030, they could represent 50%, which means a bigger investment in attracting young in the universities towards STEM curricula, and to increase the number of bachelor in STEM, the number of engineers, the number of scientists in STEM domain. Adopt a 5-year national research agenda and set up a national research fund, which could be a target. Set up and pilot 5 technology and innovation parks, for instance. And at the end, maybe one of the target, and which could be the overarching target of the STI roadmap, could be to try to reach 1% of the GDP on research and development expenditures of at least 50% coming out from the public sectors. But again, that's target for food for thought for you, but it's, in my view, quite important in the process of designing the STI roadmap to think about long-term performance indicators that you want collectively to reach and to commit for the next 10 years, and against which the performance of the system will be appraised every year or every 3 years. Thank you for your attention, and of course we are keen to take any questions on board.
Thanks very much, Mathieu. And I think we already have some questions, maybe more logistical, but we have some participants who've been asking today about whether they can get the presentations. Will that be possible?
Of course.
Okay, excellent. So we'll be sharing those by email. Provided that we have your email, we'll be sharing those presentations from today as well. Ahead of next workshop, I think it'll be great if everyone takes a moment to review, what's in those presentations ahead of next workshop. Any questions about what Mathieu has just shared around the roadmap? We're happy to take some questions now.
Jeff, can I have just a remark?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank Mathieu for your presentation. I think all are important. I prefer you the objective. You may say it's kind of like pillar. You don't need to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it may be a full communication that, okay, 1 is the first priority, second is a second priority, and 2, 5 like that. So if you just put like, okay, here the 5 objectives, kind of like pillar is it possible like that, Mathieu?
Yeah,
and also, please try to shorten the word so that something easy for us to remember the 5 pillars there. It would be very essential when we do infographic as well in our future presentation. Thank you.
That will be done. Thank you for your
Excellency. Yes, Excellency, I support the 5 strategic option. Yeah, what you presented. However, just include some area for research, including in research and national station and research developments station, as well as the National Research Institute also should be included. That is related to the research capacity. And of course, in the enabling environment for, yeah, of course I put in chat already, but I just repeat what I want to add is we put something to enhance private sector to investment in research and development for the technology and innovation. That is related to the strategic option or area number 5. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we have some questions in the chat. So normally Tang asks, could you elaborate on how you set the target on the 5 priorities?
Okay, setting targets is not about is not rocket science. First, I think that it is important. I think it's about how to reflect a certain level of ambition. And if you look at the path of countries such as Vietnam, which have demonstrated quite impressive capacity to accelerate the path towards a more knowledge-based economy in the last 10, 15 years, basically since the adhesion of Vietnam to the World Trade Organization. So it was late 90 and start really early 2000. So let's say in 15 years, they have been capable to increase quite a lot for instance, their percentage of GDP invested in research and development. So in our view, providing that there is a strong commitment from the government, from the private sectors, it's not absolute. It's not unrealistic to set as a target to reach 1% of the GDP by 2030 in Cambodia, starting from 0.12 in 2015. Again, in the light of the path of competing and partnering countries in the area. So, which means basically a multiplication, of course, by 7 or 8 times of the investment. But again, I think it's more about setting a direction of the travel than setting a target in the marble and being in a failure if you are not reaching that target. It's not about punishment and failure. It's about demonstrating, showing the direction of the travel and getting the buy-in from the STI community in the public sector and in the private sectors to reach the target.
Thanks very much. Now I'm seeing in the chat, we've got some email addresses coming in, so that's going to be very useful. We do not have your email addresses, so if you'd like for us to send you a copy of the slides, do go ahead and drop your email into the chat, and then we will be able to do that. Excellent. So I'm seeing more of those emails come in. We have a few comments as well. So Vuta Hing, for example, looking at this concept of agglomeration and some other things that could potentially go into the roadmap. Excellent, all excellent points. And for those comments, what I'm going to encourage you folks to do is to actually share them with us. So we're not going to necessarily discuss all of the comments in the session today, but your detailed comments, if you could email them to us, that would be really excellent, because that will allow us to compile them ahead of the workshop. So for your detailed comments, we would love to get them by email. I see that the Ministry of Civil Service has their hand up. If I could invite you to speak. Ministry of Civil Service. At Has Bhutan.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Good afternoon to all. First, I just like to ask a question whether you accept only a question at this time, or you also accept comment on the draft roadmap.
I think if it's a short comment, we can accept it. We want to make sure that we can allow people to get home at a good hour to get dinner and everything. So if it's a detailed comment, it would be fantastic to get it by email. But
Okay.
If it's a short comment, we can do it now.
So general comment is okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. First, I would like to correct that most of the data that mentioned in the paper as from UNESCO was actually from GS and ATC, like the 0.12 or less. And secondly, talking about technology transfer, human resource development abroad, joint research, we should also mention about science and diplomacy, because in relation across country without agreement between countries, then it would be hard or not possible to realize the activity. And that will be achieved mostly through the science agenda in the cross-country meeting or even summit of the top country leader is required. And the paper talk about the triple helix, quadruple helix. I would appreciate to see more the actor, the 3 actor or the 4 actor that have been mentioned, which are university or higher education institution and a research institute. The university personnel mostly have the role and responsibility, main role and responsibility as the teacher, most teaching job, education, and the researcher or the personnel in the research institute are mostly full-time research, which is more fitted to the technology adaptation. I think it's just important to mention it clearly about that one. And talking about the process of research and development, I think we should also clarify about research and mostly refer to basic research and development, and also the not to forget the commercialization, which is more appropriate in the innovation part of the industry or private enterprise. And we have, the presentation has mentioned a number of times on the importance of connection and coordination, and to avoid the silo of activity. I think for that reason, it is important to mention in the activity on program that try to connect different parts of the puzzle together, so that we can produce something or realize something that has been mentioned. For example, if there is an innovation program that connects between research and industry and the public procurement, for example, which has consumed a lot of national resource, but if we can take use of that kind of scarce resource to promote production in the country, and if it's short of technology or something, then we can find or fit from the research institution. I think that way can also work together. I have mentioned this in the interview also, just to clarify on that again. And on the research competition, I think that is good, because the supply will always be not enough for the demand for research. But we also should stress the importance of top-down approach for the research excellence. So there is a team that is very good, so we have to take best use of them, and so on. In general, on the paper, I see very good text, only the activity in the table that need to be, adding more. So, and talking about coordination, talking about reorganization, the role and responsibility of the organization, we should not forget that those are possible only through the authorization of the law in some degree. So there would be a need for developing and adopting the law for STI and so on. Yeah, I think my general comment can be this short. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the feedback. So that is all the time that we have for feedback, but I just want to share this. So number one, share your email in the chat so that we can make sure that we can send you the slides. Number two, you can share your detailed feedback at this email address that you see here. And I've also pasted that email address in the chat. So these are the two things that you can do as immediate next steps is share your email in the chat, send us your detailed feedback at the email address that's provided here. Now I'm going to turn things over to our colleagues at Technopolis to tell us a little bit about the next steps and perhaps what might happen in our second workshop.
Thank you very much, Cal. So I believe that we will fully work in details of these presented STI roadmap. The idea in the second workshop will be that we start with getting your point of view on the 5 pillars we've draw actions on, and really go into details on the actions points, on the timeline, on which stakeholder is going to be involved at the first level in implementation, or in being consulted, or in follow-up the action implementation. So that's really, it's going to take also 3 hours of discussions, intense discussions with voting system and with rooms for discussions as we did today. So we really look forward to this very important moment, because this is really when, again, we get this roadmap more precise. I think it's been called for by a number of participants, and really implementable, because we will have had your point of view on whether each of the actions are feasible, are pragmatic and implementable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then if I could pass things over to our colleagues at MISTI to help us close the session for today.
Thanks, Jeff. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. But allow me to talk a few words in Khmer. បាទខ្ញុំសូមអរគុណអាយដាមលោកជំទាវលោកស្រីដែលបានចូលរួមនៅក្នុងវគ្គទី1តាក់ទងជាមួយនឹងការរៀបសេមីនានេះដោយអាយដាមលោកស្រីបានឃើញហើយយើងមាន5ជាអត្ថភាពប៉ុន្តែ5អត្ថភាពយ៉ាងណាយើងត្រូវធ្វើឲ្យបានក្នុងឆ្នាំ2023ក្នុងឆ្នាំ2030សុទ្ធតែជារឿងដែលយើងទាំងអស់គ្នាដែលប៉ះពាល់ទៅដល់ស្ថាប័នរបស់អាយដាមលោកស្រីផ្ទាល់តែម្ដងអញ្ចឹងហេតុដូច្នេះខ្ញុំយើងមិនទាន់ចប់ទេយើងនៅថ្ងៃទី21ម្ដងទៀតអាយដាមលោកស្រីអាចមើលឃើញផ្ទាល់នៅក្នុង SCI roadmap ដែលយើងបាន plan ហ្នឹងហើយអាយដាមលោកស្រីអាចតាក់ទងមកខ្ញុំផ្ទាល់ឬក៏តាក់ទងក្រុមការងារដែលមានសម្បត្តិអញ្ជើញហ្នឹងមានលេខអាច approach តាម Telegram ក៏បានតាម email ក៏បានដែរអាយដាមមកសុំឯកសារផ្សេងដែលអាយដាមលោកស្រីត្រូវការអាចផ្ញើផ្ទាល់តាម Telegram មកលេខទូរស័ព្ទដែលនៅក្នុងសម្បត្តិអញ្ជើញហ្នឹងតែម្ដងក៏បានឬមកខ្ញុំផ្ទាល់សម្រាប់អាយដាមលោកស្រីដែលស្គាល់ខ្ញុំស្រាប់អញ្ចឹងហើយក៏អាចសុំទៅគាត់បានដែរដើម្បីយើងគ្រប់គ្រងគ្រប់វិធីដើម្បីធ្វើម៉េចឲ្យបានយើងបានព័ត៌មានគ្រប់គ្រាន់ពីព្រោះយុទ្ធសាស្ត្រដែលយើងដាក់2033 2023 2030នេះសុទ្ធតែជារឿងយើងទាំងអស់គ្នាដែលត្រូវធ្វើឲ្យបានហើយមិន MISTI អ្នកធ្វើទេអាដាមលោកស្រីសូមកំណត់ចំណាំមកកន្លែងហ្នឹងហើយនៅពេលទីទៀតយើងធ្វើជាគោលនយោបាយចំ specific ទៅលើស្អីមួយនឹងយក road map នេះជាគោលហើយអញ្ចឹងសូមឲ្យអាដាមលោកស្រីព្យាយាមស្វែងយល់ពីអ្វីដែលតាក់ទងផ្ទាល់ជាមួយអាដាមលោកស្រីនៅក្នុង SCI assessment ឬក៏ SCI road map ដែលយើងមានហ្នឹងបាទ so at the end thank you very much UNESCAP thank you very much UNESCAP expert team Francis Mathieu as well as Jeff for your kind and effort especially to make this first workshop with interministerial comments. I think this is essential for our next step on the second workshop on 21st January for further updates. So please keep in touch and make sure that all apology to say this but would be a homework for everyone for your institution to work out further if you have any comment because we have to have a sense of responsibility or ownership of this roadmap for all of us, not only MISTI, but for all of us. So I would like to thanks very much at the end, and I hope you have enjoyed a very good evening today. Thank you.
คนน้อยว่างมันเลิกท้ายบายบายบายบายมั้ง
I think it's only us now.
Okay.
Yes. Hi.
Okay. We are only the 6 of us?
Yeah, it looks like it's 6.
Yeah.
No, 14 participants.
So it's the waiting room. Yeah.
They're in the waiting room, some of them. So it's just co-hosts.
Okay.
Okay. So we can talk freely.
Yes.